By the time Clara reached the fourth floor, her coat was dripping onto the stairwell steps, and her chest felt so tight she had to stop beside the window with the cracked frame. Outside, Boston blurred beneath the rain, all red brake lights and silver puddles, the kind of city that looked beautiful only when you were not trying to survive inside it. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes and forced herself to breathe. $300. That was what remained of her rent. $300 and a warning from Victor Hale that sounded less like policy and more like a promise. She could almost hear Rachel already, her best friend from the cafe, saying, "Clara, you gave away your own roof." But Clara could not regret it. Not fully. Not yet. Regret was a luxury for people who had better options. She climbed the last flight and stopped outside apartment 4C. The brass number was tarnished. The door stuck in the winter and whistled in the wind, but it was hers. It had been her mother's before it was hers. Inside, the apartment was small enough that the kitchen light reached the bed, and the bed reached the window, and the window looked straight into the brick wall of the building next door. Still, Clara loved it with a stubbornness she could not explain to anyone rich enough to call a place temporary. On the refrigerator, held up by a faded magnet shaped like a lobster, was a photograph of her mother in a flour-dusted apron, laughing with one hand over her heart. Clara touched the edge of it with 2 fingers. "I did something brave," she whispered. Then, after a pause, she added, "Or stupid. I am not sure which." The apartment answered with the steady drip from the ceiling near the radiator. She placed a mixing bowl under it, changed out of her wet shoes, and counted the remaining cash again at the kitchen table, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves out of pity. They did not. $300. She opened the little blue tin where she kept emergency money. Inside were 2 quarters, a grocery receipt, and her mother's handwritten cinnamon roll recipe, folded so many times the creases had gone soft. Clara unfolded it, not because she planned to bake, but because the paper smelled faintly of vanilla and old cupboards, and sometimes that was the closest thing to being held. The next morning came gray and cold. Clara woke before her alarm because someone was knocking down the hall. For one hopeful second, she thought maybe Nate Collins had come to repay her. Then she heard Victor's voice, sharp through the walls, telling Mrs. Alvarez in 4A that maintenance requests did not excuse late fees. Clara sat up, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. The building seemed to sigh around her. Pipes clanked. A radiator hissed. Somewhere below, a baby cried, then quieted. Life went on, even when people were one notice away from losing the place where they kept their memories. At 7:30, Clara tied her hair back, buttoned her work shirt, and hurried to the Spin Cycle Café, the laundromat diner on the corner of Salem and Prince Street, where half the customers came for clean clothes and the other half came because the coffee was cheap and Clara remembered their names. Warm air hit her as she walked in, carrying the scent of detergent, toast, and burnt espresso. Washers rumbled along the left wall. The old neon sign in the window flickered between open and pen. Rachel looked up from behind the counter and narrowed her eyes. "You look like a ghost who had to work a breakfast shift." Clara reached for an apron. "Good morning to you too. Do not good morning me. Did you pay Victor?" Clara tied the apron strings a little too carefully. Rachel saw it. "Clara, I paid some of it. Some of it. Most of it went to someone else." Rachel set down the coffee pot. "Please tell me someone else means the electric company or a hospital or literally anything with a customer service number." Clara did not answer. Rachel closed her eyes. "Oh no. What did you do?" Before Clara could explain, the bell above the cafe door chimed. Nate Collins stepped in from the sidewalk, hair still slightly damp, the same gray coat hanging from his shoulders. He looked around like a man studying a place he had no right to miss yet. When his eyes found Clara, something in his face softened. Rachel followed Clara's gaze and whispered, "Please do not tell me that is your charity project." Clara gave her a warning look, then walked to the end of the counter. "Coffee." Nate nodded. "Black, please. $1.50. He reached into his pocket, then paused just long enough for Clara to notice. She quickly looked away, pretending to wipe the counter. "It is on me," she said. No, his answer came too fast. "I can pay." He placed 2 crumpled dollar bills on the counter. They looked real. They looked worn. They were also, in a way Clara could not know, the only cash he had allowed himself to carry for the role he was playing. She poured the coffee. "Did you sleep all right?" He took the mug with both hands. Better than I deserved. Clara smiled faintly. That is a strange answer. It was a strange night. He glanced toward the washers, the old tables, the bulletin board crowded with job flyers and babysitting cards. You work here every day? 6 days. Sometimes 7 if someone calls out. And you still had time to rescue a stranger. I did not rescue you. I bought you time. Nate looked at her over the rim of the mug. Sometimes time is the rescue. Clara did not know what to do with the weight in his voice, so she reached under the counter and pulled out yesterday's unsold blueberry muffin, wrapped in wax paper. Here. He looked at it. Clara, do not make it dramatic. It is a muffin, not a kidney. For the first time, he laughed. It was quiet, surprised, and so warm that Clara felt it before she could stop herself. Rachel, watching from the espresso machine, raised both eyebrows. Clara ignored her and slid a folded sheet of paper beside the muffin. There is a job center on Tremont Street. They help with applications. If you have a resume, they can clean it up. If you do not, I can help you write one after my shift. Nate's fingers rested on the paper. He should have refused. He should have told her the truth right there, before her kindness dug any deeper under his skin. Instead, he heard himself ask, "Why do you keep helping me?" Clara leaned on the counter, tired eyes steady. Because I already started. And because I would hate to find out I stopped one step before things got better for you. Nate looked down at the job center address, feeling the lie of his name sit heavier in his pocket than any wallet ever had. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the street still shone with what it left behind. Inside, Clara moved from table to table, refilling coffee, smiling at lonely people, saving quarters for an old man whose dryer had eaten his change. Nate watched her, and for the first time since he had entered the Hanover Arms under a false identity, he understood that he was not simply investigating a building. He was standing inside the quiet evidence of everything his company had failed to protect. That evening, after the last dryer stopped spinning and the cafe chairs were turned upside down on the tables, Clara sat across from Nate in a corner booth with a pen in her hand and a blank resume template between them. The laundromat lights had dimmed to half brightness, leaving the room soft and blue around the edges. Outside, the wet sidewalk reflected passing headlights, and somewhere down the block, a siren faded into the distance without urgency. Clara tapped the paper. All right, Mr. Collins. Work history. Nate looked at the empty lines as if they were more dangerous than any boardroom he had ever entered. That is complicated. Clara gave him a patient look. Most lives are. We simplify. I have done management. What kind? He paused. If he said real estate development, asset acquisition, urban investment strategy, it would all start to peel apart. So he lowered his eyes and said, property work, buildings, budgets, people. Clara wrote carefully, property operations. He almost smiled. That sounds better than I deserve. Stop saying things like that. Like what? Like you are already guilty of something. Her words landed too close. Nate looked toward the washers lined against the wall, their round glass doors dark now, like small, empty moons. Clara noticed the silence and softened her voice. You do not have to tell me everything. But if you are trying to start over, you need something on paper that makes people give you a chance. She slid the form closer to him. Everybody deserves at least that. He studied her face. The tired focus in her eyes, the tiny ink smudge near her thumb, the way she made dignity sound practical, like coffee or clean socks. And what about you? He asked. Who gives you a chance? Clara laughed once, quiet and dry. I am still waiting for the committee to review my application. I am serious. So am I. She leaned back and stretched her wrists. I give myself chances. Small ones. Every morning. I get up. I go to work. I do not scream at rude customers. I pay what I can. I keep going. She glanced toward the bulletin board where neighborhood flyers curled at the corners. That is not inspirational, by the way. It is just rent. Nate looked down at the receipt folded in his pocket, the one she had handed him the night before. It felt like a secret with sharp edges. Clara clicked the pen again. References? I do not think my old references would help. Bad terms. Different world. She nodded like she understood more than he had said. Then we start with what you can do. Can you fix things? Some things. Can you show up on time? Yes. Can you treat people decently when you are tired? He looked at her then. I am trying to learn. That made her pause. Not because the answer was charming, but because it sounded honest in a way people rarely risked. For a moment, the room went still. Then the front door rattled. Victor Hale stepped in without knocking, shaking rain from a black umbrella even though the sign had already been flipped to closed. Clara stood quickly. "We are closed." Victor looked from her to Nate, and his mouth lifted in that thin smile Clara had learned to dread. "I am not here for coffee." Nate's posture changed almost imperceptibly. Not aggressive, not loud, just alert. Victor pulled a folded notice from inside his coat and placed it on the table in front of Clara. "Since you chose to prioritize Mr. Collins last night, I thought I would give you the courtesy of a reminder. Balance due by Friday at 5 o'clock. Late fee included." Clara did not pick up the paper. "Friday is 2 days away. That is how calendars work. You already charged me a late fee last month when the online portal was down." Processing issue. The portal was down for the whole building. Victor's eyes cooled. "Careful, Miss Bennett. You are a tenant, not an auditor." Nate watched Clara's fingers curl against the edge of the table. She was embarrassed. Not for herself, exactly, but because humiliation in public always stains more than the moment. He wanted to end it with one sentence. He could. He could say his real name, call the legal department, freeze Victor's access, order an internal audit before midnight. But if he did that now, everything Clara believed about him would collapse at once. So he stayed silent, and the silence burned. Victor turned his attention to Nate. "And you, enjoying your charity extension?" Clara stepped forward. "Do not." Victor blinked, amused. "Excuse me. Do not talk to him like that." Nate looked at her, stunned. She had already lost money because of him, and now she was putting herself between him and the man who could make her life harder. Victor chuckled. "You are defending a stranger who cannot cover his own rent." Clara's cheeks flushed, but her voice did not break. "I am defending a person. There is a difference." The room seemed to hold its breath. Even Rachel, who had been counting the drawer in the back, appeared near the kitchen doorway with wide eyes. Victor slipped the notice closer to Clara. "Friday, 5 o'clock. After that, the building follows procedure." He turned and left, the bell above the door trembling behind him. Clara stood still until the sound faded. Then she sat down slowly, picked up the notice, and folded it smaller and smaller until it fit beneath her palm. Nate's voice came low. "I am sorry." She did not look at him. "Do not be sorry. Be better." The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Nate nodded, even though she could not see it. "I will." Clara pushed the resume toward him again, as if refusing to let Victor have the final word. "Then we finish this." For the next hour, she helped him build a life on paper that was not his, using careful phrases and gentle lies of omission. Reliable, experienced with buildings, strong communication skills, willing to learn. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had become mist. Clara locked the cafe door, then shivered as the cold came through her thin sweater. Nate almost removed his coat, then stopped, afraid the gesture would reveal more than kindness. Clara glanced at him. "You okay?" He looked at the tired woman who had spent her evening helping a billionaire apply for jobs he did not need, while her own eviction notice sat folded in her pocket. "No," he said quietly, "but I think I needed to not be okay." She studied him for a second, then gave a small nod, like that answer made more sense than it should have. They walked back toward the Hanover Arms under the dull glow of streetlights, two figures moving side by side through the damp Boston night. Clara thought she was helping a man rebuild from nothing. Nate knew the truth was worse. She was helping him see that all his billions had built towers high enough to overlook people, but not one honest place where his conscience could hide. Friday arrived with a pale sunrise and a cold wind that made the old windows of the Hanover Arms tremble in their frames. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of water ticking into the mixing bowl by the radiator, one drop at a time, steady as a clock, counting down to 5 o'clock. She lay still for a moment beneath her thin quilt, staring at the ceiling stain that had spread into the shape of a gray cloud. Then she turned her head toward the refrigerator, where her mother's photograph smiled back from beneath the faded lobster magnet. "I know," Clara whispered, though she did not know what she was answering. She got dressed in the half-dark, pulled on her black work pants, and counted her money at the kitchen table for the third time that week. $300 from the envelope, $148 in tips from 2 brutal shifts, $22 from the blue tin, if she included the quarters, $470. The balance due was $940 after Victor's late fee. Clara stared at the numbers written on the back of an old grocery receipt until they blurred. She could ask Rachel, but Rachel was covering her own father's medication. She could sell the little gold bracelet her mother had left her, but the pawn shop on Hanover Street had already offered so little it felt like an insult to memory. She could work 3 more shifts, but time was not something Victor accepted as payment. At 7, she left the apartment with her hair pinned back and her smile practiced into place. The hallway smelled faintly of boiled coffee and old paint. Mrs. Alvarez from 4A was taping plastic over her window to stop the draft, her small hands stiff with cold. Clara stopped. Did maintenance ever fix the frame? Mrs. Alvarez gave her a tired shrug. They said next week. They always say next week. Clara took one side of the plastic and helped smooth the tape along the wall. There. That should hold for a little while. You have troubles too, Mija, Mrs. Alvarez said softly. You do not need to help with mine. Clara smiled, but it came out sad. Maybe that is exactly why I should. Downstairs, near the mailboxes, Nate was standing with a paper cup of gas station coffee in his hand, looking up at the broken security camera above the entrance. He turned when he saw her. You are leaving early. Breakfast rush. She noticed the camera, then his expression. What? He looked away too quickly. Nothing. Just wondering how long that has been broken. Since Thanksgiving. Has anyone filed a complaint? Clara almost laughed. This building runs on complaints. They just do not go anywhere. Nate's jaw tightened. Clara saw it and misread it as worry about his own situation. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a small brown paper sack. Here. He looked inside. A cinnamon roll wrapped in wax paper, the glaze slightly uneven. You made this. My mother's recipe. Do not get excited. It is breakfast and emotional manipulation. I need you to actually go to that job center today. Nate held the bag carefully, as if she had handed him something breakable. Clara, you should not keep giving me things. Probably not. I mean it. So do I. She stepped around him toward the door, then paused. And do not let Victor scare you. He talks like he owns the air in this place. Nate watched her leave, the paper sack warm in his hand. The moment the door shut behind her, his phone buzzed. A name appeared on the screen. Madeline Ross, Chief Legal Officer. He stepped into the shadow near the mailboxes and answered. Tell me. Madeline's voice was crisp, professional, and concerned. You were right. Hanover Arms is owned through a subsidiary we acquired 18 months ago. Operational control was delegated to Hale Residential Management. Victor Hale has submitted repair invoices every month, but the vendor accounts look suspicious. Same mailing address. Different company names. Nate looked up at the peeling ceiling, at the water stains spreading above the lobby light. So repairs were billed, but not completed. That is what it looks like. And the tenant fees? Still reviewing. But I found repeated late fees charged during documented portal outages. Nate closed his eyes. Clara's voice returned to him. Do not be sorry. Be better. He opened them again. Keep digging. Quietly. I want proof before I move. Nathaniel, the acquisition meeting is Monday. The redevelopment vote is already scheduled. Then we have until Monday to find out how much of this company forgot people live inside the word property. He ended the call and slipped the phone away just as Victor stepped out of the management office, carrying a clipboard and humming like a man pleased with himself. His eyes landed on Nate. Collins. Still here. Nate kept his voice even. Looks that way. Victor tapped the clipboard. Do not get comfortable. These old buildings are changing hands soon. People who cannot keep up usually get left behind. Nate studied him. Is that what you tell everyone? It is what everyone eventually learns. Victor walked away, leaving the words hanging in the lobby like a bad smell. By noon, the Spin Cycle Café was packed. Rain threatened again, and customers crowded in with laundry baskets, strollers, backpacks, and tired faces. Clara moved between the counter and the tables, balancing plates, refilling coffee, smiling when her feet ached. A man in a wool coat complained that his toast was too dark. A college student asked if she could spot him a quarter for the dryer. An older veteran at the corner table quietly counted nickels for soup, and Clara pretended not to. Notice when she charged him for coffee instead. Rachel watched all of it with a look that was half admiration, half heartbreak. You are impossible, she muttered as Clara passed. I prefer consistent. You are $470 away from being homeless. Clara's smile flickered. Do not say it out loud. Then stop acting like silence pays rent. Before Clara could answer, the bell over the door chimed. Nate came in, and for 1 second, the noise of the cafe seemed to soften around him. He had shaved, not clean enough to look polished, but enough to look like he was trying. Clara noticed and smiled despite herself. Job center. After this. Nate. I went by the building office first. Her smile faded. Why? He set a folder on the counter. I asked a few neighbors about maintenance. Mrs. Alvarez. Mr. Donnelly on the second floor. The couple in 3B. Everyone has been charged fees. Everyone has pending repairs. Clara glanced at the folder, then back at him. Why are you doing that? He hesitated. The truth pressed hard against his ribs. Because someone should. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Careful, she said quietly. That kind of thinking gets expensive. I know. No, she said, picking up a coffee pot, her voice softer now. You really do not. Nate watched her walk away, her eviction notice folded somewhere in her bag, her mother's recipe still dusted in flour on his fingertips, and he knew the distance between them was no longer measured in money. It was measured in truth. And every hour he stayed silent, that distance grew. By 4:30 on Friday afternoon, Clara had learned that time could move in 2 directions at once. At the Spin Cycle Café, the clock above the pastry case seemed frozen, its red second hand jerking from mark to mark as if it were tired too. But inside Clara's chest, every minute rushed toward 5 o'clock. She had $470 in her tote bag, folded inside an envelope with her name written across the front. She had called no one. She had asked for no loan. Pride was not the reason. Pride would have been cleaner. The truth was simpler and sadder. Everyone she knew was already carrying something heavy. Rachel had slipped $50 into Clara's apron pocket during lunch, and Clara had slipped it right back into Rachel's purse before her friend could notice. Mrs. Alvarez had offered a little cash from a cookie tin. Mr. Donnelly from the second floor had said he could sell his old radio. Clara had thanked them all and refused them all, because being loved by struggling people often felt like watching candles try to warm each other in a storm. At 4:40, Nate entered the cafe with the folder under his arm and a look on his face that made Clara stop wiping the counter. What happened? She asked. Victor is holding a tenant meeting in the lobby at 5. Clara's stomach dropped. A tenant meeting? Rachel looked up from the register. That sounds fake. It is real, Nate said. Notices went under doors this afternoon. Clara reached into her tote bag and pulled out her phone. No missed call. No message. I did not get one. Nate's jaw tightened. I know. Clara understood before he said anything else. Victor did not want to remind her. He wanted her surprised. He wanted the room full when he made an example of her. For 1 second, fear moved through her so sharply she had to grip the edge of the counter. Then she untied her apron. Rachel stepped closer. I am coming with you. Clara shook her head. You have the dinner rush. Clara, I need you to keep my job alive in case I still have a home after this. Rachel's face softened with anger she could not use. That is not funny. I know. Nate opened the door for her, and they stepped into the late afternoon cold. The sky over the north end had turned the color of wet slate. The walk back to Hanover Arms took 7 minutes, but Clara felt every cracked sidewalk, every traffic light, every breath she could not quite finish. Nate walked beside her in silence, the folder held tight in his hand. Twice he seemed about to speak. Twice he stopped. At the building entrance, Clara turned to him. Whatever Victor says, do not make it worse for yourself. Nate looked at her. Clara, there are things you do not know. There are always things people do not know. This matters. Then tell me after 5 o'clock. She pushed through the door before he could answer. The lobby was already crowded. Tenants stood in coats and work uniforms, some with grocery bags still in their hands, some with tired children pressed close to their sides, some just watching because in a building like Hanover Arms, bad news spread faster when spoken out loud. Victor stood near the mailboxes with his clipboard, smiling like a host at a party no one wanted to attend. Clara felt eyes turn toward her. Heat rose in her cheeks, but she kept walking until she stood near the front. Nate stopped a few feet behind her. Victor clapped his hands once. Thank you all for gathering. I will keep this brief. Due to repeated late payments, unauthorized tenant-to-tenant financial interference, and concerns about stability in the building, management will be enforcing lease terms more strictly moving forward. A murmur passed through the lobby. Clara felt the phrase land exactly where he aimed it. Unauthorized tenant-to-tenant financial interference. He meant her. Victor lifted a pink notice. Miss Bennett, since you are here, perhaps we can begin with your account. Clara heard Mrs. Alvarez whisper her name. She heard someone else exhale through their teeth. Her fingers closed around the envelope in her tote bag. She stepped forward and held it out. I have $470 today. I can bring the rest next week. Victor did not take it. Your balance is $940. I know. Then you know this is insufficient. It is what I have. Victor smiled. That seems to be a pattern. Nate moved, but Clara lifted one hand slightly without turning around. Please. Not yet. Victor looked around the room, enjoying the silence. Let this be a lesson to everyone. Paying another tenant's rent does not excuse your own obligations. Compassion is admirable, but leases are legal documents. Clara's face burned. She could feel every person watching her, and for a moment she was back at 19, standing in a pharmacy line, praying the card would not decline. But then she looked at Mrs. Alvarez near the stairs, at Mr. Donnelly with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, at the young couple from 3B holding a stack of repair requests. These people were not laughing at her. They were afraid for themselves. Clara took a breath. You are right, she said. Victor blinked, surprised by the calm in her voice. Leases are legal documents. So are repair requests. So are receipts. So are fee notices. The lobby shifted. Clara reached into her tote bag and pulled out the folded notice he had given her, then another from last month, then the printed screenshot of the online portal outage Rachel had helped her save. You charged me a late fee when the portal was down. You charged Mrs. Alvarez for a window you never fixed. You charged Mr. Donnelly a maintenance surcharge for a heater that still does not work right. You talk about rules like they only point downward. Victor's smile vanished. Miss Bennett, you are emotional. No, Clara said, her voice trembling but clear. I am tired. There is a difference. Someone in the back murmured, that is right. Victor's eyes hardened. Be very careful. Clara looked at him then, really looked, and all the fear inside her changed shape. It did not disappear. It became something sturdier. I may be poor, Mr. Hale. I may be late. I may have made a choice you think was foolish. But I will not be ashamed of helping someone stay out of the rain. The lobby fell silent. Nate stood behind her, unable to move. He had sat across from senators, investors, and men who could shift markets with one phone call. None of them had ever sounded as powerful as Clara Bennett did with $470 in her bag and nothing but truth in her hands. Victor leaned close enough that only the front row could hear. Truth does not pay rent. Clara held his stare. Maybe not. But lies should not collect it. A quiet ripple moved through the tenants. Nate looked down at the folder he had been carrying, packed with evidence, names, invoices, patterns. He could still reveal everything. He could end Victor's little performance right there. But the call came before he could speak. His phone buzzed once. A message from Madeline lit the screen. Confirmed. Hale diverted repair funds. Board wants you at Monday. Acquisition vote. Press may attend. Nate's throat tightened. Monday. The real battlefield was no longer the lobby. It was the room where men in suits would decide whether people like Clara were numbers to clear or lives to protect. Victor straightened his tie and announced that formal notices would follow, but his authority had cracked. People were no longer looking at Clara with pity. They were looking at Victor with questions. Clara turned and walked out through the side door into the courtyard, where the air was cold enough to sting. Nate followed her. She stood beneath the fire escape, blinking hard, refusing to let the tears fall while anyone could see. You should not have heard all that, she said. Nate's voice was quiet. I am glad I did. She laughed once, unsteady. That was humiliating. No, he said. That was brave. Clara looked at him, and for a dangerous second, the space between them softened. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced down before he could stop himself. On the screen, Clara saw only 3 words before he turned it away. Caldwell acquisition vote. Her expression changed. Caldwell. Nate went still. The rain began again, soft at first, dotting the concrete between them. Clara's eyes moved from his face to the folder in his hand. Nate, she said slowly, why would someone be texting you about Caldwell Urban Living? He opened his mouth, but no answer came fast enough. And in that pause, the first thread of the lie finally began to show. For one long second, Clara heard nothing but the rain tapping against the metal stairs above them. The courtyard behind Hanover Arms seemed to shrink around her, brick walls rising on three sides, trash bins lined against the fence, puddles trembling under the fire escape. Nate stood close enough that she could see the water collecting on the shoulders of his gray coat, close enough to see the hesitation in his eyes, and that hesitation frightened her more than any answer could have. "Why would someone be texting you about Caldwell Urban Living?" she asked again, slower this time. Nate slipped the phone into his pocket, but the movement came too late. The name had already entered the air between them. Clara knew Caldwell. Everyone in the building knew Caldwell. Flyers had appeared 2 months earlier with polished language about neighborhood revitalization, future development, and improved urban living. Victor had called it an opportunity. Mrs. Alvarez had called it what it felt like, the beginning of losing home. Nate looked toward the lobby door, then back at her. "Clara, I can explain." Clara let out a small breath that was almost a laugh. "That is what people say when the truth is about to be worse than the lie. My name is not Collins." The words landed quietly, but they hit hard. Clara did not move. "What?" "It is Caldwell. Nathaniel Caldwell." Her face changed so slowly it was almost worse than shock. First confusion, then recognition, then something wounded and cold. "No," he swallowed. "Yes." "Caldwell as in Caldwell Urban Living." "Yes." "Caldwell as in the company trying to take over this building." "Yes." The third yes seemed to take something out of him, but Clara did not care. Not in that moment. She stepped back, and the space between them filled with rain. "You stood in that office and let me pay your rent." Nate shook his head. "I did not know you would do that. But you let me. I tried to stop you. You tried once. Softly. Then you took the receipt." Her voice was calm now, and that calm scared him. "You sat in my cafe. You let me give you coffee. You let me give you food. You let me help you write a resume. I wanted to tell you. But you did not. Because I was investigating Victor. Because this building is connected to my company through a subsidiary, and I needed to see what was happening without people performing for me." "Performing?" Clara repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that what you think this is? A performance? My rent? Mrs. Alvarez taping plastic over her window? Mr. Donnelly counting coins for soup? Did we look real enough for your investigation?" Nate flinched. "That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He looked down at the folder in his hand. "I meant that when people know who I am, they lie. Managers clean hallways before I arrive. Tenants are coached. Reports get rewritten. I wanted the truth." Clara's eyes filled, but her voice did not break. "And you got it. Congratulations." She turned toward the door, but he stepped after her. Not blocking her. Never that. Just desperate to keep the conversation from ending in ruins. "Clara, Victor is stealing from this building. He is charging illegal fees. He is billing repairs that never happened. I have proof. I can fix this." She stopped with her hand on the wet railing. "You can fix this." "Yes. Of course you can." She turned back then, and the hurt in her eyes made him wish she would yell instead. "That is the cruelest part, Nate. You were never helpless. You were never trapped. You were never one envelope away from losing everything. You could have fixed this before I ever met you. I did not know. But once you did, you still stayed hidden." The rain picked up, sliding down the brick wall behind her. Nate searched for the right words and found only smaller truths. "At first, I stayed hidden for the investigation. Then I stayed because of you." Clara stared at him. "Do not make that sound romantic." "I am not trying to." "Yes, you are. Or maybe you do not know the difference. Men like you turn ordinary people into stories you can feel better about later." Nate's face tightened. "Men like me. Rich men. Powerful men. Men who walk into a broken building wearing a costume and call it courage. Men who think being lied to by staff is the worst thing that can happen because they have never had a notice taped to their door." He had no defense. Every sentence found its mark because every sentence was partly true. Clara reached into her tote bag with shaking hands and pulled out the folded receipt from Victor's office. The original, the one she had taken when she paid the $900, not realizing Nate had kept a copy too. She pressed it against his chest. He caught it before it fell. "Here, your proof, your souvenir, whatever you want to call it." "Clara, please. Do not." She wiped rain from her cheek, or maybe it was not rain. "You know what I thought when I gave you that money? I thought, maybe this man just needs one person to believe he is worth saving. And all that time you were standing there with more money than I will see in a lifetime." It was never about the money. It is always about the money when you are the one without it. That silenced him. Clara looked past him toward the lobby windows, where tenants were beginning to leave the meeting in small, uneasy groups. What else was real? She asked. Nate's voice dropped. All of it. The coffee. Real. The resume. Real. In the way that I wanted to be the man you thought I was. That is not real, Nate. That is wanting to be forgiven before you confess. He looked at her then, truly looked, and saw how much damage a gentle lie could do. He had spent his life fearing people who wanted his money. He had not understood the greater danger was becoming someone who used secrecy to take what money could not buy. Trust. Clara stepped around him and walked back inside. This time, he did not follow. He stood alone in the courtyard as the rain soaked through the gray coat. He had chosen to make himself look ordinary. In his hand, the receipt softened at the edges. $900. A small number in his world. A life-changing number in hers. Upstairs, Clara reached apartment 4C and shut the door behind her. She did not cry at first. She moved with strange calm, hanging her wet coat, placing her tote bag on the chair, setting the remaining $470 on the table. Then she saw her mother's photograph on the refrigerator, the smile, the flower on her apron, the eyes that had always believed Clara's kindness was strength. Clara covered her mouth and finally broke. Not because Nate was rich, not because he had lied, but because for a few brief days, she had believed the world had given her someone who understood what it felt like to be afraid and keep going anyway. Downstairs, Nate walked into the lobby with the folder in one hand and Clara's receipt in the other. Victor was near the mailboxes, speaking to a tenant in that smooth, superior tone. When he saw Nate, he smirked. Trouble with your little benefactor? Nate looked at him, and something in his expression made Victor's smile falter. For the first time since entering Hanover Arms, Nathaniel Caldwell stopped, pretending to be powerless. He took out his phone and called Madeline. Move the audit up, he said. Freeze Hale Residential's access tonight. And prepare me for Monday. Madeline paused. What changed? Nate looked at the staircase Clara had climbed, the old walls, the broken camera, the lobby full of lives his company had reduced to columns. I finally understood the cost. All weekend, Hanover Arms felt different, not safer, not yet, but awake. People who had spent years lowering their voices in the hallway now spoke in small circles by the mailboxes. Mrs. Alvarez showed her stack of unanswered repair requests to the couple from 3B. Mr. Donnelly taped copies of his heating complaints to his apartment door, not as protest exactly, but as proof that he had been telling the truth all along. Clara noticed all of it from behind her own closed door, where she moved through Saturday like someone trying not to touch a bruise. She went to work. She came home. She reheated soup. She folded her mother's recipe and unfolded it again. She did not answer Nate's knock at 6 in the evening. She did not answer his second knock at 7:15. When an envelope slid under her door, she stood across the room staring at it like it might contain fire. It had her name written on the front in careful handwriting. Inside was a cashier's check for $900 and a note with only one sentence. This is what I owed you, not what I am asking from you. Clara held the check for less than 10 seconds before opening the door and walking down the hall. Nate stood near the stairwell, as if he had known she would return it. He looked tired, no longer in costume exactly, but not polished either. The gray coat was gone. He wore a dark sweater, simple slacks, and the expression of a man who had finally run out of ways to hide from himself. Clara held out the envelope. No, he did not reach for it. It is your money. It was my choice. A choice I should not have allowed. You do not get to clean your conscience by reimbursing me. That is not what this is. Then what is it? He looked down at the envelope between them. The first repair I knew how to make. Clara's face tightened. For a moment, she almost softened, and that made her angrier. I am not a broken pipe, Nathaniel. The full name struck him harder than any insult. I know. Do you? Her voice stayed low, because the hallway carried sound too easily. You keep trying to fix the part of this that can be counted. $900. Late fees. Repair funds. But you cannot reimburse the feeling of sitting across from you, trying to help you write a resume, while you knew you had an executive board waiting for your Monday morning opinion. Nate swallowed. The resume was real to me. Clara gave a sad laugh. That is the problem. You think your feelings make the lie softer. He looked at her then with no argument left. You are right. The hallway went quiet. Clara had expected defense. Explanation. Some polished, billionaire version of regret. She had not expected surrender, and for a second, it unbalanced her. Nate continued. I thought hiding my name would reveal the truth about other people. It did, but it revealed more about me. I saw broken doors and cold rooms and fees no one should have been charged. And still I waited. I told myself proof mattered. Strategy mattered. Timing mattered. But the truth is, I was also afraid. Because every day you treated me like someone worth trusting, and I knew I was becoming less worthy of it. Clara looked away, toward the window at the end of the hall where the city lights blurred in the glass. I do not know what you want me to say. Nothing. His voice was gentle. I am not here to ask for forgiveness. Then why are you here? Because tomorrow the board votes on the Hanover acquisition plan. Victor and Hale Residential expected us to approve redevelopment, terminate existing leases over time, and convert the building into luxury units. Clara's hand tightened around the envelope. So it is true. It was the plan before I came here. And now, Nate took a breath. Now I am going to stop it. Clara turned back to him. You can do that. I can try. I control enough votes, but there will be resistance. Investors like clean numbers. Empty buildings look cleaner on paper than full ones. Full of people, you mean? Yes, he said, and the shame in his voice was plain. Full of people. Clara studied him, trying to find the performance, the angle, the part where his apology turned into a request for her approval. She did not find it. That made everything harder. Why tell me? Because you deserve to know what happens next. And because tomorrow, when I walk into that room, I am bringing the file we built from this building. Your notices. Mrs. Alvarez's window. Mr. Donnelly's heater. The fake invoices. The late fees during portal outages. Victor's reports. All of it. Do not use me as a symbol. The words came fast. I am not some poor girl who teaches a rich man how to feel. Nate nodded once. I know. You are the person who told the truth before I had the courage to act on it. Clara felt the sentence move through her, not sweetly, not romantically, but heavily. A truth offered without decorations. She pushed the envelope against his chest. This time he took it, because refusing would have been another way of arguing. Do what you said, she told him. Not for me. For them. She nodded toward the doors lining the hallway. For everyone who has been told to wait until next week, while someone else got paid for doing nothing. I will. And Nate. He looked at her. If you go into that boardroom and make this about what I did for you, I will never forgive you. His eyes held hers. Then I will make it about what my company failed to do for them. Clara said nothing, but some of the hardness in her face shifted. Not gone. Just changed. She went back into her apartment and shut the door softly. On Monday morning, the city woke under a clear sky that looked almost too clean for what was coming. Nathaniel Caldwell stepped out of a black car in front of Caldwell Urban Living's glass tower downtown. No gray coat, no false name, no borrowed helplessness. His suit was navy, his jaw freshly shaved, his face unreadable to the receptionist, the security guards, and the executives who straightened when they saw him cross the marble lobby. On the 42nd floor, the boardroom overlooked Boston Harbor, all sunlight and steel and expensive silence. Men and women in tailored suits sat around a long table, tablets glowing, coffee steaming in porcelain cups. At the far end of the room, Victor Hale sat beside two representatives from Hale Residential Management, wearing the confident smile of a man who believed paperwork could hide anything if the right people stayed comfortable. Madeline Ross stood near the screen with a thick folder in her arms. She met Nate's eyes, then gave a small nod. They had enough. The chairman smiled. Nathaniel, shall we begin with the Hanover Arms redevelopment vote? Nate remained standing. For a moment, he saw two rooms at once. This one, with its polished table and million-dollar view, and the Hanover lobby, with peeling paint, broken cameras, and tenants holding repair notices like shields. Then he placed Clara's returned envelope on the table, not to display it, not to dramatize it, but to remind himself of the difference between cost and value. No, he said. We begin with what we have been calling redevelopment, and why that word has been hiding neglect. The room stilled. Victor's smile twitched. Nate looked directly at him. And then we discuss why Caldwell Urban Living allowed people to pay for repairs that were never made. Outside the glass walls, Boston glittered in the morning sun. Inside, for the first time, the powerful people in the room stopped looking at the building as an asset and started realizing it had witnesses. The boardroom did not explode into argument right away. At first, it did something worse. It went polite. The chairman adjusted his glasses. One investor slowly set down her coffee. Another board member leaned back as if distance could make the words less serious. Victor Hale gave a careful little laugh, the kind designed to make truth sound like confusion. "I am sure there has been a misunderstanding," he said. Nate looked at him without raising his voice. "There has been. For 18 months, this company misunderstood silence as satisfaction." Madeline tapped a remote, and the screen behind her changed from the polished redevelopment proposal to a simple photograph of Hanover Arms. Not the brochure version. Not the rendering with new balconies and rooftop gardens. The real building. Peeling paint at the entrance. A broken security camera above the mailboxes. Plastic taped over Mrs. Alvarez's window. A brown stain spreading across Clara Bennett's ceiling. The room became very still. Nate walked to the end of the table. "This is the property Hale Residential Management described as stable, compliant, and ready for repositioning. Their reports stated that tenant issues were minor, maintenance was current, and late fees were standard." Madeline clicked again. A column of invoices appeared. "These are repair charges billed to Caldwell subsidiaries over the last year. Window insulation, elevator service, heating system inspections, leak remediation. The same repairs tenants kept requesting. The same repairs that were never completed." Victor's smile had disappeared. "Those records require context. You will have time to provide it to counsel," Madeline said evenly. Nate kept his eyes on the board. "We also found late fees charged during documented online portal outages, tenant notices issued without proper delivery, and maintenance surcharges attached to units with unresolved complaints." The money moved. The work did not. A man near the center of the table cleared his throat. "Nathaniel, with respect, this is disturbing, but it does not necessarily change the redevelopment value. In fact, poor condition strengthens the case for full conversion." Nate turned toward him. "That sentence is exactly why we are changing the case." The man frowned. "We have fiduciary obligations. We have human obligations too." The words hung there, almost out of place beneath the recessed lighting and framed architectural awards. Victor leaned forward. "Mr. Caldwell, the tenants at Hanover Arms are emotional. Some are chronically behind on rent. Miss Bennett, for example, has been interfering with management processes and encouraging hostility." Nate's jaw tightened at Clara's name, but his voice stayed controlled. "Miss Bennett paid $900 to keep a neighbor from being displaced during a rainstorm." Victor looked around the table, seizing the opening. "Exactly. Unauthorized payments between tenants create confusion and liability." Nate reached into his jacket and placed a folded receipt on the table. The paper was no longer perfect. The rain had softened one corner. His thumb rested near the printed number. "That tenant she helped was me." The room changed. Not loudly. It changed in posture, in eyes lifting, in mouths closing before prepared responses could come out. The chairman stared at him. "You?" "I entered Hanover Arms under the name Nate Collins to observe the property without advance preparation from management." Victor's face drained of confidence. "That is highly irregular. So is charging people for repairs your company did not make." Madeline clicked again, and this time the screen showed transfer records, vendor addresses, duplicate invoices, and internal emails. Victor looked at the screen, then at the door, then back at Nate, as if hoping the room might rearrange itself into mercy. It did not. Nate continued. "Effective immediately, Caldwell Urban Living is terminating its relationship with Hale Residential Management pending full legal review. All questionable fees charged to Hanover Arms tenants will be refunded with interest. All eviction actions tied to those fees are suspended. Emergency repairs begin this week under independent supervision." A murmur moved through the room. The investor who had set down her coffee looked at the numbers on her tablet. "And the redevelopment vote?" Nate picked up the glossy proposal from the table. "Luxury conversion. Vacancy optimization. Market repositioning." Words that had sounded intelligent until he had seen Clara standing in a lobby with $470 and more dignity than anyone in that room. He tore the proposal in half once. Not violently. Deliberately. Then he placed the pieces on the table. "Withdrawn." The chairman exhaled. "Nathaniel, Hanover Arms will become Caldwell Urban Living's first long-term affordable housing restoration project. Current tenants stay. Rents are stabilized within lawful limits. Repairs are prioritized by need, not optics. And we establish an emergency housing fund for residents facing short-term crisis. That will reduce projected returns, someone said. Nate nodded. Yes. Significantly. Yes. Investors will ask why. Nate looked out over Boston Harbor, bright and clean beyond the glass, then back at the room that had taught him how easily numbers could sound moral when no one mentioned names. Tell them the truth. We built wealth from neighborhoods. Now we protect one. Victor stood abruptly. You cannot put this all on me. Nate looked at him. I am not. That is the point. The room quieted again. Victor Hale exploited a system, but Caldwell allowed the system to exist. I allowed it. I signed reports I did not read closely enough. I trusted summaries because they were convenient. That ends today. Madeline stepped toward Victor with a folder. Mr. Hale, company counsel will contact you regarding document preservation. Your building access is revoked as of this meeting. Victor's mouth opened, then closed. No dramatic shouting followed. Just the small, ugly collapse of a man who had mistaken unchecked authority for power. 2 security staff escorted him out with professional calm, and the door shut softly behind them. By late afternoon, the news reached Hanover Arms not through a speech, but through action. A repair crew arrived first, then an independent property supervisor, then a woman from Caldwell's tenant relations team carrying printed notices written in plain English. No evictions tied to disputed fees. Refund review beginning immediately. Emergency maintenance schedule posted in the lobby. Mrs. Alvarez cried when a contractor measured her window. Mr. Donnelly stood beside the heater technician like a man watching spring arrive early. The couple from 3B read the notice 3 times before believing it. Clara heard the commotion from inside apartment 4C, but did not open her door until someone knocked gently. It was not Nate. It was Madeline Ross, composed but kind-eyed, holding a sealed envelope. Miss Bennett. Clara nodded. I am Madeline Ross, counsel for Caldwell Urban Living. I wanted to deliver this personally. Clara did not take it right away. Is this from him? It is from the company. Your account has been corrected. The late fee from last month was improperly charged. Your current balance has been adjusted, and your tenancy is not at risk. Clara stared at her. What? Madeline held out the paper. You are safe in your home. The sentence was so simple that Clara almost did not understand it. Then she did. Her hand trembled as she accepted the envelope. Inside was a corrected statement, a refund notice, and a maintenance appointment for the leak above her radiator. At the bottom, in clean black print, were words she had not expected to see. Balance due, $0. Clara pressed the paper to her chest and looked down the hallway. Tenants were talking, laughing softly, crying in corners, comparing notices, breathing as if the building had finally opened a window. At the far end near the stairwell, Nate stood alone. He did not come closer. He did not smile like a man waiting to be thanked. He just looked at her with tired eyes and a folded receipt in his hand. Clara held his gaze for a moment. The hurt was still there. So was the lie. So was the memory of rain, coffee, a resume, and a cinnamon roll wrapped in wax paper. But beneath all of it, something else had appeared. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Proof. For 3 months, Clara did not forgive Nate Caldwell. She spoke to him when the restoration team needed tenant input. She answered his emails with short, practical sentences. She stood beside him in lobby meetings because the residents trusted her more than they trusted anyone wearing a tailored coat. But she never let him walk her home, never accepted coffee from him, never allowed the softness in his eyes to become her responsibility. And Nate did not push. That was the first thing that made her begin to believe the change in him might be real. He showed up without asking to be praised. He sat in folding chairs while tenants listed complaints. He listened when Mrs. Alvarez explained that a window was not just glass. It was the difference between sleeping through winter and waking up coughing. He apologized to Mr. Donnelly without blaming Victor, the old management company, or a missing report. He approved new locks, safer lighting, working heat, repaired plumbing, and a clear rent portal with printed alternatives for residents who did not use computers. But the thing that mattered most to Clara was not the money spent. It was the way he stopped speaking first. The Hanover Arms changed slowly, then all at once. Scaffolding rose outside the brick walls. Fresh paint covered the stairwells. The broken security camera above the mailboxes was replaced. The elevator that had groaned for years began moving smoothly between floors. In apartment 4C, Clara's ceiling was repaired, the radiator stopped leaking, and for the first time in years, she could fall asleep without placing a bowl under the stain. Still, every night, she looked at her mother's photograph on the refrigerator and wondered whether safety always came with a cost. One chilly April morning, just as cherry blossoms began opening in the small park 2 blocks away, Clara arrived at the Spin Cycle Café to find a white envelope taped to the employee entrance. Her name was written across the front, not in Nate's handwriting, but in Madeline Ross's neat professional script. Inside was an invitation to a community reopening ceremony at Hanover Arms. At the bottom, one line had been added by hand. Your voice shaped this. Please come as yourself, not as anyone's symbol. Clara read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket. The ceremony happened on a Saturday afternoon under a bright Boston sky, the kind that made old brick look warm instead of tired. Folding chairs lined the courtyard. There were no velvet ropes, no champagne towers, no glossy banners promising luxury living. Instead, there were trays of sandwiches from the deli around the corner, paper cups of lemonade, and a simple sign near the entrance that read, Hanover Arms Community Restoration. Residents came in their Sunday coats and work shoes. Mrs. Alvarez wore a blue scarf. Mr. Donnelly brought his repaired old radio and set it on a table, where soft jazz played through the little speakers. Clara stood near the back, holding a paper cup between both hands. She had almost not come. Then she saw the new plaque beside the lobby door and froze. It was small, brass, and plain. The First Month Fund, created to help residents facing short-term housing emergencies. Inspired by the belief that one act of courage can keep a door open. Clara's throat tightened. Nate stood a few feet away, speaking with the new property supervisor. When he saw her, he did not rush over. He simply excused himself and approached slowly, giving her every chance to walk away. You made it, he said. Clara looked at the plaque. You did not use my name. You told me not to make you a symbol. I did. So I listened. She glanced at him then. He looked different in daylight among the tenants, not because of his suit, which was simple and dark, but because he was not standing above anyone. He was carrying extra cups under one arm, and there was a smear of dust near his cuff from helping set up chairs. Clara looked away before her heart could make too much of that. The fund is real. Fully funded for 10 years. Independently managed. Tenants sit on the review board. Good. I asked them to reserve one seat for you, but only if you want it. Clara gave him a careful look. That sounds dangerously close to asking me for something. Nate nodded. It is, but not for me. Before she could answer, Madeline called everyone to gather near the courtyard steps. Nate walked to the front, but he did not take a podium. There was no podium. He stood on the same cracked concrete where Clara had confronted him in the rain, now swept clean, with flower planters along the wall. I will keep this short, he said. A few months ago, I entered this building believing I needed to discover what was wrong with it. I found broken systems, yes. I found mismanagement, neglect, and numbers that did not tell the truth. But I also found people who had been telling the truth for years and were ignored because their problems were inconvenient. His eyes moved across the residence, then briefly to Clara, only briefly. This restoration is not a gift from Caldwell Urban Living. It is a debt repaid. And the work does not end with paint, locks, or repaired windows. It ends only when every person here knows that their home is not treated as someone else's temporary investment. The applause came softly at first, then stronger. Clara clapped too, though her hands trembled. Afterward, as people moved toward the food tables, Nate approached her with something in his hand. A small frame. He held it out, but did not force her to take it. Inside was the receipt from that first night, flattened and preserved behind glass. The ink had faded slightly at one corner where rain had touched it. Under it, engraved on a small silver plate, were the words, "The rent you paid saved more than one home." Clara stared at it until the courtyard blurred. "I thought you kept this to remind yourself," she said. "I did. Then why give it to me?" "Because it was never mine." Clara took the frame slowly. Her thumb brushed the glass. She remembered the office, the rain, Victor's smile, the weight of the envelope leaving her hand. "I was so angry at you," she whispered. "I know. I am still angry sometimes. You have that right. But I also saw what you did." Nate lowered his gaze. as if he did not want to accept more grace than he had earned. I should have done it sooner. Yes, Clara said. You should have. He nodded. No defense. No excuse. And there it was, the small quiet thing that finally loosened the knot inside her. Not his wealth. Not the repairs. Not the fund. The absence of excuse. Clara looked toward the lobby, where Mrs. Alvarez was laughing with Rachel, where Mr. Donnelly's radio played, where people walked through a building that no longer felt like it was waiting to push them out. My mother used to say you do not need to be rich to be kind, Clara said. Nate's voice softened. You told me. She was right. But I think kindness also has to grow teeth sometimes. Otherwise people like Victor eat around it. A faint smile touched Nate's face. Your mother sounds wise. She was. Clara looked at him. And you still owe me one thing. Anything I can honestly give. No more false names. No more hidden tests. No more deciding what people can handle before you tell them the truth. Nate held her gaze. Never again. Clara believed him. Not completely, not blindly, but enough to open a door she had been holding shut. 1 year later, the First Month Fund opened its first small office in the restored ground floor of Hanover Arms, in the room where Victor had once handed out pink notices. Clara left the Spin Cycle Café as a full-time coordinator, helping families, seniors, and workers bridge the kind of short emergencies that used to become disasters. Nate came by twice a week, not as a savior, not as a secret billionaire, but as a partner who made coffee badly, carried boxes well, and asked more questions than he answered. On the anniversary of the night Clara paid his rent, the residents held a potluck in the courtyard. Someone hung string lights from the fire escape. Rachel brought cupcakes. Mrs. Alvarez made rice and chicken. Mr. Donnelly played jazz. Nate waited until the laughter settled into a warm evening hum before walking Clara to the brass plaque by the door. He handed her a small key. She looked at it, confused. What is this? Not a penthouse, he said gently. Not a gift you did not ask for. It is the office key. Your board voted today. The First Month Fund is now tenant-led, and you are its director if you accept. Clara looked down at the key, then at him. You are giving up control? I am returning it to the people who should have had it. Her eyes filled. That is a better answer than I expected. Nate smiled, nervous in a way she had never seen before. Then he reached into his pocket and took out a small velvet box, but he did not open it right away. This part is not from the company, he said, and it is not repayment. It is only a question from a man who learned, painfully and late, that love without honesty is just another kind of debt. Clara stopped breathing for half a second. Around them, the courtyard seemed to quiet, though no one had asked it to. Nate opened the box. The ring was simple, elegant, set with a modest diamond and a tiny engraved pattern along the band that looked like a key turning in a lock. Clara Bennett, he said, his voice unsteady. You once helped me keep a room I did not need, and somehow showed me how to become a man who could protect homes that mattered. I cannot promise I will never make mistakes. I can promise you will never have to wonder who I am while I make them. Will you marry me? Clara looked at the ring, then at the office. Key in her palm, then at the building where her mother's photograph still hung on the refrigerator upstairs. She thought of rain, of a folded receipt, of anger that had not destroyed kindness, only taught it to stand taller. Then she smiled through tears and held out her hand. Yes, she said, but you are still terrible at coffee. Nate laughed, and when he slipped the ring onto her finger, the courtyard burst into applause. Clara looked around at the lights, the repaired windows, the neighbors who had become witnesses to more than survival. She had once believed she was paying rent for a stranger. In the end, she had opened the door to something neither of them could have bought, a home built on truth, a love tested by action, and a promise that kindness, when brave enough, could change the locks on an entire life.